It's another edition of Time About the Movies, and today we're taking a look at the movies of August 26, 1994. We got 5 movies to look at today, so let's just jump on into it. And we'll start off with the biggest new release of the weekend, and that is Oliver Stone's latest film, Natural Born Killers. I mean, he wasn't wrong. I mean, that's kind of where we have gone in the world in the 30 years since this movie came out. I mean, not to this extreme level, but yeah, Natural Born Killers. This is what happens when you take the direction of Oliver Stone and take a script by Quentin Tarantino and mesh it together, and you get a pretty damn grisly, over-the-top, fun movie. I mean, this is a movie that doesn't really get a whole lot of attention, mostly because in 1994, of course, Tarantino made a far superior film in Pulp Fiction, which we'll get to eventually, but nobody ever really talks about this movie, especially for Oliver Stone, who had just come off of these best-known films like Platoon, Wall Street, Born on the 4th of July, JFK, and then had a misfire the year before with Heaven and Earth, which was not a very good film, but this movie actually works really well. This is a film that really knows what it wants to do. It wants to talk about how we're getting into this. Sooner or later we're going to be using these lovers and mass murderers and using them to glorify them by the mass media. It's a satire of where mass media is essentially becoming in the future, and it works with these two, with Woody Harrelson and Juliette Lewis. I think this was the movie that finally woke everybody up and said that, hey, Woody Harrelson's not just Woody from Cheers. I mean, this guy can act pretty well. I mean, we've known Juliette Lewis can act really well, and so we with Robert Downey Jr. too, and Tommy Lee Jones, and you also it's a really good cast involved in this. Like Tommy Lee Jones is also in here. Rodney Dangerfield is in here. Edie McClure. In the director's cut, actually, Ashley Judd's also in this. So is Dennis Leary, Bret Hart, Rachel Ticotin. Just a really good cast overall, and it has this nice dark grisly visual style that really is so unique and so different than what we're used to seeing from these type of movies. But once again, that's the power of putting the direction of Oliver Stone and the writing of Quentin Tarantino together, and it makes for a pretty good movie, really good movie that takes some big jabs at where media is going in the future, and in a way they were kind of right, but not to the extreme levels that this movie does. But yeah, it's a really, really solid movie. It's a film that has so much there. It's both very funny, the acting is great, there's great bits of action and romance mixed in here. The violence and the over-the-top graphic violence is in here. It makes sense, and it makes sense for what they're trying to say about what kind of a story they want to set up. And it works really well. It's a film that really works on so many levels. It's a movie that really is a film that has had a lot of lasting power over the years. It's an amazing film, a dark, grisly film, and I can't help it. It's a great film. Natural Born Killers, if you haven't seen it, do yourself a favor and definitely check it out. So anyway, that's Natural Born Killers. Let's move on to a much more family-friendlier movie, and that is Christopher Lloyd in Camp Nowhere. So this is directed by Jonathan Prince, who I don't think a lot of people really are that familiar with, but I mean, if you watched TV back in the 90s, you definitely have seen him before, albeit briefly. There was a show that he did back in the 90s that he was a game show host that he did called the Quiz Kids Challenge. It was on Game Show Network in the it was later rerun on Game Show Network in the late 90s, and it was on for only like a couple of years. And like he's also noted for as being one of the creators of American Dreams, the show that was on in the 2000s that was actually pretty decent, but only ran for a couple of seasons. So this is the only movie that I think he's directed, and I mean, for what it is, it's passable. It's a movie that is honestly, I think that the concept could have some potential, but the execution just really isn't set up. This is mostly set up on having a major star in the leading role to kind of be the comedic foil in this. In this case, it's Christopher Lloyd, and Christopher Lloyd can be great if you put him in the right role, but in here, it feels like he's kind of forcing the comedy in this. You also have some notable names that would later become big stars, like Jonathan Jackson is in here, Jessica Alba is also in this, Hilary Tuck, Heather DeLoach, Wendy McKenna from, was she on American Dad? I can't remember if she's on American Dad or if I'm thinking of someone else. Okay, I'm thinking of someone else. She's actually the mom on Oliver Bean. If you ever seen that show, it was on Fox in the early 2000s. It only lasted a couple of seasons, but I don't know. I thought it was all right. But she's in there. Tom Wilson is in here. You see there. Emmett Walsh is in this. Peter Scolari is also in this movie. So there are some notable names in here. The concept overall, I think there's potential there, but there's just not enough execution there to make it work. It's a film that, you know what it kind of reminded me of? It reminds me of the end of the Camp Krusty episode of The Simpsons, where the kids are fed up because Krusty hasn't shown up and Bart starts this revolution, and so the kids take over the camp. And I would not be surprised if the people who wrote this movie took that idea and put it into this movie, which, coincidentally enough, that episode of The Simpsons was actually meant to be a Simpsons movie back in the 90s, but they couldn't figure out how to stretch it out into a full-length movie. Well, I guess somebody tried to do it here, and you can kind of see why it never... I'm kind of glad that never came to be, because, yeah, this does not seem like an idea that really worked as well as I thought they wanted it to. I mean, it could... Like I said, in the right hands, if a better script was in there, it didn't feel like it was very formulaic, maybe it could have worked, but as it is... I don't know. I just didn't feel like it worked out, at least in my opinion. I know some people might have a nostalgic feel for it, but not me personally. So that's Camp Nowhere. Now let's move on to the next movie, and that is Wagons East, a notable film from John Candy. This is notable because, of course, this is the film where John Candy was working on it, and he died of a heart attack in his sleep while they were filming the film. And because of this happened in the final days of the production of the movie. And even John Candy's presence in the movie feels kind of forced in, and it was kind of because it had to be, because he was contractually mandated to make the film due to his existing contract with Caracol Pictures, who put this out, from the scrap film that he was going to do with Sylvester Stallone. And despite not liking the script all that much, he basically had to do it so he could pay back some of the money that he had as a stake as a minority owner of the Toronto Argonauts football team. And he agreed to make this movie. And of course, after this, the studio actually received an insurance payout of $15 million, and they basically had to use CGI, a body double, and script rewrites to finish Candy's remaining scenes in the film. Like I said, they were almost done with the film. And the film literally came out 5 months after his death. And while Candy made one more movie after this, which honestly was a lot better than this movie. That was Canadian Bacon, but not by that much. We'll eventually get to that one. But this was just a bad movie altogether. Like, this was a movie that was trying to be the new Blazing Saddles for the 90s. We've already talked about another one of these movies like this, Lightning Jack with Paul Hogan. And that was also a misfire on a number of levels. And sadly, this one is too. It's a film that just doesn't work. It's a film that's really lazy. The jokes aren't funny. John Candy deserved a lot better than this. And it's just a shame, too, that this is the last thing that he did before his death. And it just didn't work. It just didn't work. It's a really bad comedy. It's not funny. Everybody's wasted in here. Not just Candy, but Richard Lewis, John C. McGinley, Ellen Greene, Robert Picardo. These are some notable names in here, and they're all being wasted on this movie. And Charles Rocket in this movie, not one of two really bad comedies he was in this weekend. We'll get to that one in just a second. But yeah, there's nothing more to say about this one. Everyone was trying to make the next Blazing Saddles a much more safe and marketable Blazing Saddles, but you can't do it. It just can't be done. We've already had two Western comedies that tried to do that in 1994, and it didn't work. I mean, the closest we got to a good Western comedy this year was Maverick, and that worked on its own levels, and it worked because it didn't try to be Blazing Saddles again. But yeah, this movie was just terrible, a waste of talent all around, and sadly, it's the last reminder of the great legacy that John Candy left behind, and such a shame too. But like I said, he did end it. I mean, the last movie that officially came out with him, and it was a lot better. But not by much. But we'll get to that one whenever we get to that one. Let's just get away from Wagons East and talk about another terrible comedy from 1994 that came out this weekend, and that is It's Pat the Movie. You know, Wayne's World was such the big hit, and everybody wanted to make their next great SNL sketch into a movie type of thing. And, I mean, it worked a little bit with Coneheads and Wayne's World 2, but the thing about It's Pat is that it's a one-joke premise. I mean, is Pat male or female? And as a sketch, it works because it's only about a 5 to 6 minute sketch. And it's something like, okay, we can let that slide. But when you try to release it as a movie, you get this mess of a film, and you know it's bad when the studio doesn't even believe in it. It releases in three theaters, and only makes $60,000 in its release. Like Touchstone Pictures, Disney knew that this was bad to begin with. Like that's how it's like you can see why. It's just a terrible movie. There's nothing funny in here. And the main reason why the movie fails is that there's nothing redeemable here. We don't even get to see if Pat is really a man or a woman or not. There's a scene where it gets revealed, but not to the audience, and it's just like, what's the point of making this movie if you're not even going to tell us what it is? Like, the critic made a joke that was much funnier than this. I mean, Julie Sweeney has been a great writer and comedian in the past. She's very funny. She's very earnest. She could be a great actress. Even she was very reluctant to do this movie, and it definitely shows when you watch this. And you want to know what the craziest thing about this movie is? One of the writers was Quentin Tarantino. Like, Quentin Tarantino had a great movie that came out this weekend, Natural Born Killers, and then he has this name attached to this. He took his name off of it as an uncredited writer, but you can look it up and see that his name is still on it. But yeah, they waste a pretty good cast in here. You got Julie Sweeney, Dave Foley, Charles Rocket, Kathy Griffin, Julie Haggerty, Tim Stack, Mary Shear, Tim Meadows, Phil Lamar, Kathy Najimy. They even brought in Ween in here to be in the movie for some reason. I mean, it's really the worst adaptation of an SNL sketch you'll ever see. Like, there's been some really lackluster SNL movies since this movie came out, but this is the worst. Its biggest fault is that they add nothing new to the character. They kind of turn Pat into a real jerk in this movie. They don't answer the questions that we want to have answered. Like, this is what this movie should have been about. It's an unnecessary movie. At least with the Wayne's World movies, Coneheads, and the Blues Brothers, they managed to find different ranges of self-referential and over-the-top humor to make it work. But this doesn't work. You could tell that even Julie Sweeney didn't want to do this, but I guess she was maybe kind of forced into it. But regardless of what came after this from Saturday Night Live in terms of movies, this is easily the worst of the bunch. Avoid It's Pat the movie like the plague. So with that said, let's move on to the last movie. And this was a fun time finding this trailer because it's another one of those trailers where the movie is not what it's actually named to be. It's the name of it is supposed to be the Advocate, but when I found the trailer for this, it was called Hour of the Pig. But as you'll see in the trailer, it goes by the title that it's originally supposed to be, The Advocate. Okay, I've never seen this movie, so I can't really comment on it, but this movie is notable for one specific reason, and I found this out while doing the research for it. It turns out when the Harvey Weinstein sexual abuse allegations started to break in 2017, one of the early accusers was an actress in this movie, Sophie Dix. And according to this, she had claimed that he performed an unwelcome sexual act in her presence after she was invited up to his room at the Savoy Hotel to watch some rushes for the Hour of the Pig, and she called the experience the single most damaging thing that happened in her life. And some of her scenes in the UK version of the film, which includes a very explicit sex scene, as well as a short voiceover, were trimmed or cut. And it was basically suggested that Weinstein had done this as retribution for attempted rejection of his advances. So yeah, this movie has a notable piece of history for that. That's very interesting for a number of reasons, but I'm not going to get into that because that'd be a whole nother subject altogether. And like I said, I don't know too much about this movie. I don't really know about it because I haven't seen it. I can't really say much more about it, but no matter how you look at it, that's a very interesting piece of history to go with this film that probably they want to regret ever having there. I mean, as far as the movie goes, you got Colin Firth, Ian Holm, Donald Pleasance. Good cast involved, but yeah, that little bit of history now kind of changes the whole dynamic of this movie, and that's pretty much all I got for you because I have not seen this. So yeah, that's The Hour of the Pig, or The Advocate, or whatever you want to call it. And so on that note, we'll wrap up another edition of Time About the Movies, then we'll jump into Labor Day weekend on the next episode with 4 movies here, of course, because it's Labor Day weekend. Box Office Mojo just can't give you a regular list where they highlight the releases. You have to do the research on it. So far I see 4 here. Melanie Griffith in Milk Money. We have Whoopi Goldberg and Karina. we have Fresh, and we also have Steve Martin and A Simple Twist of Fate. So, as far as I know, those are the only 4 movies we'll be looking at. But if I see something that I didn't see there before, which I don't see here, I think we should be good on that front. But yeah, those are the 4 movies we'll be looking at when we meet next time. But until then, thank you very much for watching, and if you want to see more videos like this, please hit the playlist on the next page. Check out the previous episode, and I will see you guys tomorrow for another episode. So, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Until then, take care.